Chapter 20. A Spook, Unspooked. Nancy struggled with all the strength she could muster to free herself from Merv Marvel's arms. But the tall, handsome dancer had muscles as strong as steel and held her tightly. His long, powerful leaps and running steps soon carried the two of them far away from the Thurston farmhouse. Finally, he set Nancy down in a field, but maintained a vice-like grip on one arm. "You little vixen!" he exclaimed. "You may as well stop fighting because you're not going to leave me. I'll teach you to be my dancing partner." The strange remark frightened Nancy. She had hoped Merv Marvel would tire of the game he seemed to be playing and release her. Now she decided he was a bit unbalanced and could not be reasoned with. Nancy stood still and murmured, "All right, I'll behave. Now let's go back." "Oh no," Merv said. "We're going to dance." An idea came to Nancy. Maybe he was staying with a group who used the circle and cross symbol, and she could go there with him and solve this mystery. "Okay," she said. "It will be fun to dance. Will you take me to your headquarters?" Merv Marvel stared at her. "What headquarters?" With one foot, Nancy sketched out a circle and put a full-sized cross in the middle of it. Merv was startled. You know about our headquarters?" He did not wait for a reply, but said, "Yes, we will go there." He took her hand, and together they began to waltz as he whistled softly. "Now we'll leap," he said. Still holding her hand tightly, he waited for an upbeat in the tune. Then the pair made a flying swing through the air. "You're great," Merv told her. "We'll ask the Grand Master to arrange a program for us." Nancy's heart skipped a beat. Had she deliberately put herself into a situation from which it might be impossible to retreat? She quickly changed the subject. "Do you play Spook for the people at headquarters?" she asked. "No, of course not," he replied. Then, as the full meaning of her question struck him, he asked, "How did you know I sometimes play Spook?" Nancy described how he had frightened Mrs. Thurston and tried to frighten the Tabler grandchildren into believing a lot of foolish superstitions. "You know too much," the dancer said. "Who hired you to play Spook?" Nancy prodded him. Merv was not taken off guard. "You already know who it was, and I'm not going to work for him any more. Mr. Wright isn't honest, and he gets other people to do his dirty work for him." Nancy was thrilled at the progress of her inquiries. "Yes, he hired both you and Slickfingers." Merv admitted this, but denied having done anything except play Spook. He accused Slickfingers, however, of stealing a wryneck from the Harper University Museum and trying to scare Nancy with it. Later, Slick took some valuable birds from there, too. He also inoculated one of Mr. Thurston's birds with a virus and, of course, the others caught it, Merv said. Nancy remarked, "And he used chloroform to knock out Mr. Thurston and Ned Nickerson." Once again, Merv said yes, but he denied any knowledge of the theft of the live wryneck, Petra. "I know something else, though," Merv said. "Mr. Wright asked Mr. Hinchcliffe's son to annoy your friends, if he had a chance, and he pushed a supermarket cart into you, but it was the boy's own idea to throw ink and glue at the other girls while they were at the newspaper office. Well, here we go. Leap!" Nancy performed as requested. Now she could see dim lights in an old barn a short distance ahead. Merv took her directly there. Suddenly, all the illumination went out, and total silence followed. Merv stopped moving, but still held Nancy's hand tightly. A few moments later, they heard weird music on high-pitched, plaintive Mid-Eastern instruments. It was accompanied by chanting. The lights were switched on again. Nancy and Merv looked inside the barn. The walls were decorated with Oriental and African masks. The circle and cross symbol had been painted everywhere. Strange-looking people were doing an exotic, slow dance with convulsive twists and snake-like turns. "It's the devil dance," Merv told Nancy. "We'll go in." He shoved her toward a guard at the door. The man was tall, muscular-looking, and wore a European 16th century suit of armor, but instead of a helmet, his head was covered with a turban from which protruded a long, willowy gray feather. He grabbed Nancy's wrist and hissed into her ear, "We're going to make a witch of you." The musician stopped playing abruptly. Merv said to her, "The Grand Master is ready for new members." He led Nancy forward. Sometime after Nancy had been kidnapped, Ned, Bert, and Dave arrived at the Thurston farmhouse. The boys found everyone there frantic over Nancy's disappearance. A quick search of the grounds had been made, then the police had been called. Chief Pepper came in a short while with 3 officers. By now it was dark. The police focused a powerful searchlight on an area where a man's foot had stomped down hard. The police found the matching print some distance away, then another. Bess and George conferred. Had the leaping male ballet dancer been there? On inspiration, George hurried inside the house and telephoned the theater where the ballet performances were being held. She asked, "Would it be possible for me to speak to Boris Borowski?" When he came to the phone, George explained what had occurred and the suspicion that Merv Marvel might have taken Nancy away. "If so, can you give us any clue to where?" Boris was able to offer one fact. Merv Marvel was very much interested in witchcraft. "He might be a member of some demoniac group. I wish I could be of more help, and I hope you find Nancy Drew. She's a wonderful girl, and I wouldn't want anything to happen to her." George thanked Boris for his suggestion and then returned to the others. She related what she had learned. The police did not know of any meeting place for a witchcraft group, but would start a search. All this while, Ned had been conducting his own examination of the grounds. He pointed out that there were no tire tracks except those made by Oscar's station wagon. The kidnapper must have come and left on foot. Maybe if we look some more, we can find out which direction he took. Again, the officers played their searchlights over the area. Nancy's and Merv's footprints were picked up and led the searchers to the old barn. As they drew closer to it, all the lights went out. The rescue party listened. Then from within came the hoot of an owl, the secret distress signal used by Nancy, Bess, and George. "She's in there!" Bess cried out. At once, the police turned all their searchlights on the barn. People in weird costumes began scurrying from every exit. "Nancy! Nancy!" Ned cried out, dashing toward the barn, with the others at his heels. A moment later, Nancy appeared. Seeing her friends, she ran toward them. "You're safe!" Ned exclaimed as she fell into his outstretched arms. Nancy looked for the police. Finding an officer, she said to him, "Come quick! You must arrest the Grand Master. He is a fake and cons money out of all these people. Merv Marvel is one of the victims. Besides, I think he needs psychiatric treatment. You'd better take him along." She and her friends now left, and the police took charge in the barn. Nancy and the others slowly walked back across the fields to the Thurston farmhouse. As they entered it, the phone was ringing. Mr. Drew was calling Nancy to say that sufficient evidence had been collected against Ramsay Wright and the other executives in his company to bring about their arrest for fraud and coercing people into selling to him cheap the property they owned. "This really is news," said Nancy. Oscar had come to say a word himself. "Mr. Drew, could you join us out here? I think the successful conclusion of this case calls for a celebration." Mr. Drew agreed. While they were waiting for him, Mrs. Thurston, apparently fully recovered and gay and happy, helped Bess and George prepare a snack. Nancy had gone off to wash her face and hands, comb her hair, and sit down to rest for a few minutes. The various angles of the mystery ran through her mind like a kaleidoscope. Then suddenly she sat up straight, thinking, the part involving Cammy hasn't been solved. She went at once to find the Eurasian girl. Cammy was in her room, saying something softly to Petra in her native tongue. "Cammy," said Nancy, "you once promised to tell me a story about yourself and your life. Could you do so now? It may explain some of the points in the mystery which haven't been cleared up." Cammy smiled, and the two girls sat down on the bed side by side. "The wryneck in our country," Cammy began, "is almost a sacred bird. In ancient times, it was used to try bewitching people who were interfering with royalty. My ancestors belonged to the royal family, and even though the country is no longer a kingdom, we descendants have always kept a wryneck with us." The Eurasian girl said that after arriving at the university, she had become acquainted with an American boy. He turned out not to be a friend, and I was too embarrassed to talk about it. He liked to play jokes. After I told him I did not care to see him any longer, he began to annoy me in all sorts of ways. One time, when we were studying together, I had idly drawn the magical symbol of the circle with the wide cross inside it. He thought this was very funny, and later, whenever he saw a chance, teased me about it. Nancy asked, "Was he the one who put the Jinx symbol inside Ned's car and in your theme papers?" Cammy nodded. "And he is the one who stole Petra and also took my ring, which he taped underneath the bird's wing." "Did you ever speak to him about it?" "Indeed, yes," Cammy said, her dark eyes flashing. His reply was that he was sure the bird would come back to me. He was only playing a joke. "Cammy," said Nancy, giving her new friend a kiss, "please forgive us all for having been suspicious of you from time to time. I realize now why you felt you could not tell us your story." The two girls stood up, smiled broadly at each other, then went downstairs. Mr. Drew had just arrived, and the whole group sat around the living room enjoying the snack and swapping stories about the mystery. As often happened when Nancy finished work on a case, she began to wonder what the next one would be. It proved to be a highly exciting adventure, Mystery of the Glowing Eye. She was brought back to the present as her father surprised everyone by an announcement. "Just before I left the house," he said, "I had a phone call from Chief Pepper. He told me that each of the 5 councilmen wanted Nancy Drew to know that they had voted to award the building contract to another company and to accept her plan for the complex of apartment houses. Oscar, you are to stay here. Your property will not be condemned, and you will not have to sell." A great shout of delight went up from the listeners, and tears of joy filled the eyes of both Oscar and his wife, Martha. "You are such wonderful people," Oscar said. We... He found it difficult to finish. Nancy relieved him of having to say anything more. Grinning, she declared, I forgot to tell you all that the Grand Master at that strange barn actually dubbed me a witch. Somebody had better unjinx me, double quick. The end.